Today we're going to talk about a new camera. This is the A6000 from Sony. This is a new mirrorless camera announced earlier this year, and it replaces the Sony NEX6 that was announced a few years back. Now, as you can see, this is a larger, bit bulkier version of the NEX6. We don't have the NEX6 here, but we used it in Photokina 2012, and it's definitely bulkier, but in terms of general size, it's quite similar. It has a 24 megapixel sensor. It's a new sensor with a Bioness X processor. It can shoot 11 frames per second, which is very fast. And it's a quite interesting little mirrorless camera. Now we're going to take a look at some of its parts, bottoms and general ergonomics in a second. And later on we're going to talk about the image quality of this camera. On the front, the only button that we have is the lens release button right here down on the bottom part of the camera. Let's look on the top of the camera. We have the C1 button, which is a programmable button which you can decide for yourself what you want to assign this button to. We have the shutter release button and of course the on-off, which is the same button. On the right we have dial, which controls the aperture, and we have the mode dial with the M, A, P, S, etc. We have the hot shoe right here, and of course we have the flash itself, which pops in the middle of the camera. Now, let's look at the back of the camera where most of the controls are concentrated. We have here the C2 button, which is another programmable button which you can choose for yourself what you want to assign it to. You have the play. You have another dial right here which controls the shutter or the aperture depending on what mode you are using. You have the function button. If we turn the camera on, we can see some of the functions that you can control using this button. You have the flash mode, the flash compensation, the focus mode, the focus area, the creative style, DRO, which is auto HDR, white balance, you have metering mode, and the ISO. So these are all the modes that you can control using the function button. You have the AEL lock and the magnification. Right here on the right side of the camera we have the video button, which is not very comfortable to use, to be honest. It tends to be pressed by accident. It happens to us quite a bit. This is a problem with a lot of cameras these days. A lot of mirrorless cameras put the video button right here on the side. We would much rather have the video button be put on the top, but we don't shoot a lot of video with these cameras, so maybe it really depends on how much video work you actually do with the camera. You have the menu button right here, which you can see here. The menus are divided into sections. You have this section which controls the image size, aspect ratio, etc. You have this section which controls all sorts of aspects of the video. You have zebras, manual focus assist, etc. You have all sorts of wireless configurations. These are the applications. We don't have anything right now on this camera. You have the play menu configuration right here, and you have tools and various other controls, the monitor brightness, etc. Now, if you can see in the menu, as you can see in the menu, you have sub-menus. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sub-menus. These don't go beyond what you see on the screen. So this is the idea that Sony presented here, that what you see is what you get. You don't have to scroll down below what you see on the screen. Instead, you move from left to right and right to left to choose sub-menus. So this is the way the menu works. So let's go out of the menu. On the left side of the camera, of course, we have the viewfinder. It's a 1.4 million dot viewfinder. Pretty good. We're not sure if it's at the same level as the viewfinder on the NEX7. Sony claims it's more or less the same thing, although the viewfinder on the Nex 7 is has a higher resolution, but it's okay. It's quite bright. It's not very big, but it's certainly a very good thing to have the viewfinder on a mirrorless camera. We much rather have the viewfinder on the center, like the XT1, the Fuji XT1 that we have tested here a couple of weeks ago. But a viewfinder is better than not having a viewfinder any day. So this is what you get with the Sony A6000. So these are all the buttons that you have on the camera. Not a lot, but you can assign a lot of them, and for the most part they are very nice and easy to use. What we're going to show you now is a focus demonstration, and we're going to test the focus here on quite a low light situation. We are in the evening in the garden, and we're going to test the camera and its autofocus capabilities. So let's start. We'll try focus here, focus there, and repeat that a few times. As you can see, even in relatively low light situation, camera doesn't have any problem. We're using the kit lens. It's the 16 to 50 millimeter kit lens. Obviously in lower light it might have some issues, but as we've discovered with a lot of cameras and a lot of lenses, the faster the lens, typically the faster the autofocus. And even with this not very fast lens, as we can see, the camera is quite successful in focusing time and time again quite successfully. Now we're going to talk about the image quality of the A6000. We've compared this camera to our regular test camera, which is the Nikon D7100, and we came out very pleased. The image quality of this 24 megapixel sensor here is fairly similar to the image quality of the Nikon 24 megapixel sensor. In higher ISOs, basically ISO 1600 or 3200, we found that the image quality maybe favors the Nikon slightly. It depends on where you're looking at what type of object or color you're shooting. We think that the colors on the Sony are a little bit stronger than on the Nikon. It depends whether you like it or not. But in terms of noise and details, which is even more important than noise, we tested both cameras with the noise reduction off. So in terms of details, both cameras produce more or less the same amount of details at the same ISO. So we were very pleased with what we saw with this camera. Now in terms of regular shooting, you can see some images that we have shot with the A6000 now on the screen. And again, we found that this camera was very pleasing, even at higher ISOs. But normally and regular day-to-day shooting with fairly broad dynamic range, it functioned very well, and we were very pleased from its use and its image quality. To sum things up, we rather like the A6000. It's a small camera, it's slightly bulkier than the previous model, but it's still fairly small. You can't put it in your pants pocket, but you can put it inside a small bag or even in a jacket, at least with the 16 to 50 millimeter power zoom lens, which we're using right here. The camera itself has a very good image quality. The 24 megapixel sensor performed very well, comparable to maybe the best APS-C sensors, DSLR sensors on the market. It's fairly fast. You can go up to 11 frames per second in certain situations, which is very, very fast. In terms of autofocus, it might not be the fastest autofocus in the world. It's certainly not on the same level as professional level DSLRs, but it's still fairly fast, and you can capture a moving subject with a fairly well keep rate, if you like, of images. And now, in terms of things that we didn't like on this camera, well, there aren't a lot, but there are a few things. First of all, we don't really like the idea that the viewfinder is on the side, although this is something which is ordinary on other mirrorless cameras, and especially the Sony line of cameras. We would much rather prefer the central position like in the Fujifilm X-T1. We don't like the position of the video button right here. It tends to be pressed accidentally. The screen itself feels a bit small, though it's basically the 3-inch that we are used to from a lot of cameras, but it's very high quality. It's a Sony screen, and it works pretty well at bright sunlight. So this is nice. The menus are something that you need to get used to. If you like the way Sony implements its menus, then by all means. But it's not the best menu system in the world, but it's workable. You can use it. There aren't a lot of buttons, but you have at least 2 buttons which you can configure, specifically the C1 and C2, which we've configured to our own needs. We use them for both focus speaking and moving from manual to autofocus. So at the end of the day, this is a great little camera for people who like to take cameras for trips, travel photography, day photography at street, or the street photography basically, or anything of that sort. It's not very expensive, and you can read more about it on lensvid.com.